Welcome to Commander Central episode 227, and today we'll be talking about our favorite fogs. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Gentlemen, how's it going today? How you guys doing?
I'm tired.
It's cold and snowy, and I want summer back.
I'm kind of feeling the same way. I just walked my dog shortly before we started recording here, and it's like sleeting out and cold, and I'm like, man, I'll definitely take 90-degree heat over this.
And just watch like the beginning of November, we're going to go back up into the 60s or something stupid too.
It's Wisconsin, that definitely can happen. And then it doesn't help that like I've gotten multiple different calendar pop-ups this weekend being like, hey, it's GP Milwaukee or Magic Fest Milwaukee.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no, it's not. But I think that's the last one that we had scheduled that we're not going to, so I guess we're done having my calendar taunt me about things we're not going to get to do.
We can hope so.
Right. And this show will air on Monday, so I believe we're going to get Commander Legends previews coming out this week, including ours on Friday the 30th, so pretty hyped about that. At least that's the little bit of sunshine in our gloomy week, I think.
Exactly.
Did you get to play any games this week, Max?
I did not play any Magic this week at all.
Oh, okay.
I know, weird, right?
Yeah. I got to play a couple games this week. The one I was particularly happy with was my Kresh deck. I wound up taking out two people with, actually with a swing with a big creature. Because actually what I did was Matt Morgan had played the new Aisha from Zendikar, and I was able to kill it with a Tectonic Edge to put enough counters onto Kresh to survive a Blasphemous Act, which I then cast, which then put a ton more counters on Kresh. I was able to kill one person and then fling him into somebody else, and I had an Ozolith out, so then all those counters off the flung Kresh went on to the Ozolith. And then next turn, Matt rebuilt his board, and I was able to then cast a Lifeblood Hydra and move all those counters onto the Lifeblood Hydra, but of course I didn't have haste, so I couldn't swing. Comes back to Matt, he drops a Crater Hoof.
Oh.
And you know, he had rebuilt the previous turn with like, I think 5 or 6 bodies out basically, swung at me with all of them, and I had to Beast Within my own Lifeblood Hydra to gain enough life off it dying, because it had like 28 counters on it to survive the Crater Hoof swing. And then, of course, I drew like, because I think it had 33 counters or something dumb on it. Gained 33 life, drew 33 cards, which gave me enough. Yeah, I drew like 4 flings, because, of course, those counters went onto the Ozolith then. So it comes back to my turn next turn, and I was able to then just cast any creature, basically. Actually, I put the counters onto the Beast token that I had made at the Beast Within, and then just flung that at him.
That's so good.
But that was a pretty fun sequence of plays, relying on
very, very impressive.
Yeah, it felt really good, even though quite a bit of it was luck, right place, right time. But I will take it. I do not care. Luck is okay too.
Isn't that what Commander is, though? We're a singleton format. It's right place, right time.
A whole lot of it is, absolutely, because like really, the Beast Within, having that in hand, having the mana for it. I mean, right place, right time. And I also, when I killed the Aisha, that barely gave Kresh enough counters to survive the Blasphemous Act. And if it wouldn't have been Aisha, I wouldn't have been able to kill it with Tectonic Edge, which means I would have had to use that Beast Within, which I wouldn't have had in my hand to kill my Lifeblood Hydra. So like there was a whole bunch of dominoes of luck involved in that entire sequence. But you're right, that's kind of what Commander winds up being half the time. So I think that's kind of the beauty of it plenty often. Well, if you out there in listener land would like to reach out to us and talk about something cool that happened in a game you played, how would you do that, Chris?
You can reach us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us online at cmdrcentral.com, and you can also find us on YouTube, where we do mainly all our content and everything.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central. Check out our reward tiers. If you are so inclined to support us financially, that goes a long way to us creating to make the content, and hopefully one day get out there to see all of you at Magic Fest when they return. And we want to say yes, and we want to say thank you to 2 new patrons, Dr. Tadpole and Aaron Rabinowitz.
Thank you all very much. We do appreciate it. And even if all you can do to support the show is liking and subscribing on the various platforms where our content is aired, that is a big deal too. Any interaction with people out there helps the show, helps our engagement. So we appreciate whatever little bit you can do, even if it's just listening. So thank you all very much out there. And I think we have a contest ongoing here, Max, don't we?
We do. For our Patreon supporters and anybody who joins by the end of the month will be entered in to win a Patreon supporter and friend of the show, Draco Lucian's Zadahedron Grinder Gumball deck that he built for one of our community challenges, and we're going to give it away to one lucky supporter in early November.
Very cool. Okay, well, should we just jump straight in here right away and start talking about fogs?
Sure.
You can't see through them.
Yes, exactly.
It's, the right time of year to be talking about fogs. It's old tech. The basic fog from Alpha, essentially, is a single green instant that prevents all combat damage being dealt that turn. And I think fogs tend to get overlooked a little bit in Commander. But it's also that, once you print a spell that prevents combat damage for 1 mana at an instant, it's tough to make it more efficient than that. So we've got a bunch of fog variants, but they always tend to cost more because you can't really make them cost less. And there's usually some extra value attached to them. So it's just kind of an odd card type when they try to make it more enticing than that original version. So before we actually start talking about what our favorites are here, I want to talk about that aspect of it a little bit more. When it comes to things like counter spells and targeted removal, for example, people tend to prioritize the efficiency over the bonus. So, they're willing to even give up extra things to have it be efficient. They're willing to let someone get a 2/2 bird because Swan Song only casts a single mana, or they'll let somebody draw cards off an Arcane Denial because it's only 1 in a blue. They'll let people get a land off Assassin's Trophy or Path to Exile because they are so efficient. Fogs, it seems like that isn't the case. Like, the most efficient version of it is basically the original Fog, but the ones people tend to run, and at least the ones that we want to talk about here that we ourselves like, aren't that. Like, none of us, I don't think, had Fog on our list. It's all some kind of variant on that has some upside to it. What do you think separates Fog from things like targeted removal or counter spells that people are willing to pay more to get a bonus? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
My initial thought is, like, a counter spell stops the problem from really ever hitting the board, and if you can draw a card at the next upkeep, in Arcane Denial's situation, that's a bonus for you. You're replacing that spell, where fogs are the original Fog tend to only protect you in a very small period of time, which is the combat step. And most don't draw a card, they don't replace themselves, so that's not really stopping the player from, casting an extra turn spell, or come next turn they're just going to swing at you with all those big beaters anyways, so you kind of have to have another Fog or find a way out of it.
Sure.
Before that, where, a counter spell or a target removal just gets rid of the problem, and you probably don't have to think about having to deal with it again immediately.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's kind of my thought as well. Fogs are basically only used to save yourself most of the time. Like, I've seen them cast to save somebody else in a certain situation, but you're basically using them during one narrow phase of the game, which is usually the combat step, to save yourself. If no one's swinging at you, or no one has creatures, or it's not lethal, they're not worth using, versus removal or a counterspell or something where there's almost always a situation that crops up where there's going to be a situation worth using those spells for. So I think that definitely is kind of what my thought as well. Do you have any thoughts on this, Chris?
No, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just that the value of the card is not worth what it does. Like, you're paying mana to stop one thing, whereas, it could be person right after you who attacks you and you do that, and then the other two people look at you and like, he has no more fogs, we're going to nuke him out of the game.
Right, yes. I very much agree with that too. That is part of it, particularly when you're comparing it to 1v1. 1v1, when you fog that person's attack, there's a good chance you're just going to kill them on the crackback. They've left themselves wide open, assuming you were going to die. You fog, now they're wide open, and you can probably kill them or at least do a lot of damage. Yep. That's not the case in a multiplayer game where you fog one person, and if you go all in the crackback, you may be leaving yourself vulnerable to 2 other people. So the math is very different there too, and I tend to agree your fogs, at least the ones I like to run, almost always have an upside. Okay, so in talking about fogs here, I defined what fog was early, but we're going to now not really pay attention to that. We are, but we're going to stick to spells that interact with a combat step and then you use to prevent damage or escape damage somehow. But I think a lot of the spells we picked here are things that we can use as a fog, but you also use as something else, or at least have some added versatility here. And these are all things I'm perfectly fine calling a fog effect, even if they aren't necessarily strictly just that. So first of all, I'll throw it to Max. Max, what's one of your favorite fogs you want to talk about?
One of my favorite fogs is an instant in Settle the Wreckage. So this is where we're kind of expanding on the definition of fog. You cast this and you exile all attacking creatures target player controls, and then that player may search their library for that many basic land cards, and they enter the battlefield tapped. I really like this. It's a kind of a surprise. It's a combat trick. People don't expect it. At least they haven't when I cast it. And
Sure.
It really, unlike just preventing damage, I'm getting rid of 1 creature, 2 creatures, 5 creatures, an army of tokens where I don't have to worry about those come the next turn. You know, I do have to worry about maybe players 2 and 3, but I can, hopefully maybe they don't have a big enough board state where I actually justified using this spell on player 4. So this is definitely one of my favorites.
We talked about, Chris mentioned buying yourself that one turn and then someone just kills you the next turn, or everyone else sees the vulnerability. Some of the Wreckage does change that math. Yes, they get a bunch of lands, but they probably can't kill you within the next turn. They're going to rebuild within the next turn, so the turn after you have to worry. But you've bought yourself 2 turns functionally, and you've also opened that person up to somebody else hitting them pretty hard. Absolutely changes the math of the game very much. And this is a card that you've used against me to good effect on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
And the other thing worth pointing out about Settle the Wreckage too is it has the flexibility of being a thing, if you absolutely need to, you can use on yourself to ramp cards out.
Yep.
Correct.
And I haven't seen it done that often, but I've seen it done. I've absolutely seen players, particularly if they have like a Blasphemous Act or something in hand that they are planning on using anyway. I'm going to swing out at somebody, Settle the Wreckage, ramp out 4 lands, Blasphemous Act. Because they were going to wipe anyway. Why not get some value off them after you swing out? So, I mean, any little possible upside or extra bit of utility on these cards is really, really useful, and Settle the Wreckage has a lot of it.
Yep. And I did want to note, this effect also comes on a creature, Angel of the Dire Hour. It was in Commander 2014. It's been in the Mystery Boosters, and it was in Jumpstart. This is a 7 mana, 5 and 2 white for a 5/4 Angel with Flash and Flying, and when you cast it from your hand, when it enters the battlefield, you exile all attacking creatures. So they don't get the lands, but for, 3 extra mana, you're getting a 5/4 body on top of it.
Yeah, and it also has that advantage. Like, if it comes back around to you, and it just so happens nobody swung at you that turn, well, worst case, you didn't leave your mana up for nothing. You still flash in that 5/4 body and have that available next turn, to do something with if you need to.
Yeah, these 2 cards were definitely an efficiency change for me.
Yep.
I used to run Angel in Dromoka. Since then, it's been replaced by Settle the Wreckage.
Okay. All right. Chris, I'm going to jump over to you. What do you have here for a favorite fog?
Well, there's a couple of them. I'm going to kind of lump a few of these together.
Sure.
So we're going to start with, now, first of all, most of the fogs that you see are in the colors of green and white. I want to point that out right now, because most of these I'm going to bring up are green. So we got 2 in like Hunter's Ambush and Inspire Awe. Now these are both, one's 3 mana, one's 4 mana. Both of them prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. But it also says, stapled onto it, Hunter's Ambush says that it would be dealt by non-green creatures this turn, and Inspire Awe says that it would prevent damage that's dealt by non-enchanted creatures or enchantment creatures. So you're getting a value of someone swings into you, you fog with, like, say you have a whole bunch of elf tokens or something, or sapperlings. You're with Hunter's Ambush, and you're like, okay, I fog, you deal no damage, but I'm going to block all your guys with these like 40 tokens and kill all your creatures, and my guys still live. Same with Inspire Awe. You do that with the enchantment creatures or the enchanted creatures. Say you have one great big one. You swing in, even with that one, prevent the combat damage so they can't kill yours, and you just go through with trample and destroy them, and life is glorious when you do something like that.
Well, and similarly to the cards Max mentioned, those are ones that change. It's no longer, for the most part, you just preventing the damage for one turn. It's you preventing the damage and inflicting pain on them.
Yes.
In a way that's tough to bounce back from. So it's not just fogging for that turn. It's hopefully going to effectively shut them down from combat for a couple turns as they have to rebuild.
Yes.
So once again, the utility crops up there. Yeah, those are both good picks. 2 of my favorites, and I will also clump these together similarly to how you guys did, are Sudden Spoiling and Polymorphous Jest.
Those are evil.
Similar casting cost, double black and a colorless for Sudden Spoiling, double black and a blue for Polymorphous Jest. Sudden Spoiling has Split Second, which is a real big deal, and the creatures lose all abilities and become 0/2s. Polymorphous Jest makes them into 1/1s, but it doesn't have Split Second. So they're not true fogs, particularly in the case of Polymorphous Jest, because stuff is still hitting you for 1 damage, they become 1/1s, and if someone's swinging at you with, infinite creatures, or if you're at 6 life and they swing at you with 6 creatures, you're still going to die. But That doesn't happen that often. Very often when someone's doing a full-out attack that's worth fogging, it's going to be way more damage than that. And reducing it down to 5 or 6 is oftentimes good enough. So they do function as fogs in that regard, but they also kind of do a similar thing to Chris's cards, where someone swings at you with all these creatures. It's not just about fighting the damage, it's about suddenly they lose flying, and they lose indestructible, and they lose first strike and death touch and regeneration and menace and whatever, and they just become creatures that all your chumps can block then and probably kill that person's creatures. So they, again, don't get that crack back on you, don't get the chance to just come back at you next turn when that fog is gone. That is really, really useful. Additionally, they're both really good to use offensively. If you didn't need to use that fog effect to stop someone from killing you because, say, they didn't swing at you, it comes back around to your turn and you have a board state that you can swing at them with. It gives you a chance to knock their flyers out of the air again, or knock their, creatures that can block, that have first strike or double strike or death touch, to remove those abilities from their creatures. And you can do it after they declare them as blockers as well, when you swing in with your, 3 2/2 zombies, and they're like, well, I'm just going to put my big, huge, monstrous creatures in front of them as blockers. Then you cast your Polymorphous Gesture, Sudden Spoiling, and turn them into 0/2s or 1/1s, and their creatures, their big beaters that were going to be a problem for you next turn, are just now dead. So again, the flexibility is the big deal here, at least for me. They're cards that work really well as a fog effect that has an upside there, but they also work really well offensively in the combat step. And also, they don't have to be used in the combat step. You have that situation where, like, hey, someone has an Archangel Avacyn out, or excuse me, Avacyn Angel of Hope out, and they go to cast a board wipe. Well, you can just Polymorphous Gesture, Sudden Spoiling to take away that indestructible ability that Avacyn has that she's giving to everything else. There's so many situations where these are both really, really useful cards outside of just using them as a fog that I am a huge fan, and I have Sudden Spoiling and Polymorphous Gesture in a ton of different decks. Yep. Max, we'll throw it back to you here. Let's talk about some fogs that you like.
So the next one on my list is another creature, and that's Spike Weaver.
Yeah.
2 and 2 green for a spike. It's a 0/0, but it enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and it has 2 activated abilities. One is 2 generic mana and remove a +1/+1 counter from Spike Weaver to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. We don't care about that one for this discussion. We're talking about the 1 generic mana activated ability where you, again, remove a +1/+1 counter from Spike Weaver, and creatures deal no combat damage this turn. This is literally in the top 5 cards of kill on sight in my mind. I've been hosed or locked out of games because of this card, and they're typically in the blue-green Azuri decks where you can just repeatedly put counters on it through the experience counters. It's hard to deal with if you can't deal with it right away, and I wish I had a deck to run it in because I love this card so much.
You should, when you see a Spike Weaver come down, at no point should you be like, okay, well, 3 counters on it, so I just got to deal with those 3 turns, and then it's no longer useful. It never stays at 3 counters.
No.
It may drop down to 2, and then it goes back to 4 or 6 or 8 or like whatever. There's never situations where you can just wait out the Spike Weaver to lose those counters. And that's even before you get into sometimes it pops up on like a Marin deck or a Muldrotha deck where if it does, they just sacrifice it and recast it or something. Yeah,
no, people don't do that, do they?
Put infinite counters on it. No, I've seen it.
Yeah, well, and again, like, right, this is a card that is reusable, so that's the utility there. But in those decks, it absolutely is an offensive threat. There's situations where I've seen Spike Weavers with enough counters on them that, like, it's not a problem just as a infinite fog effect. It's a problem because it's now a 16/16.
It's going to kill you.
If I don't leave up blockers, it not only is not a good idea to attack, I need to leave up blockers to keep it from killing me. Yeah. That's a great card, and it had been reprinted. I think it's in the list.
Yes.
So it does show up now and then, but like it was also one of those cards for a while where it was so old and hadn't been reprinted in so long. People would see it and go, "What?
Yeah,
what does that do?" Yeah, such a good card. All right, Chris, what do you have for us?
I have a couple of them. I'm going to bring up, I'll just bring up these. There are 3, I think it was 3 accounted, 3 or 4 of them that have cycling on them. They're all 2 mana fogs. They do just a basic fog, but the ability to have cycling on it, because as I said before, I think fog is a generic card, and a lot of times it's not going to work in your favor, so why not be able to pitch it for, replace it with a different card? So I would like something, with the cycling text on it, something like that. Another key thing I've been seeing in these is there's a few of them that have the ability to, such as Tangle. We'll discuss Tangle. 2 mana instant. Yep, it prevents all combat damage, but then each attacking creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. And I think there's 3 of them that I counted that do very similar aspects of that.
Yeah.
Which then, as we were talking about the utility, you prevented them from doing anything on the next turn as well, because they don't get to untap their creatures. So then they got to build something else and figure something else to do, which also leaves them open to your other opponents coming in to beat on them.
Yeah, that's, we've said it before, but I'll stress this again since it seems to be a theme. It's the fact that a lot of these spells aren't just a one use. I mean, they are a one use, but like they have something built into how they work that affects the combat step beyond just the turn you cast it.
Yes, and that's when I think of fog, it has to do something like that. It has to have something other than just, unless I'm going, Marin Spore Frog and be like, "What's up, homies? Let's play a game." And
right. Well, you mentioned Marin Spore Frog, so I will throw Spore Frog out there next in green. And Spore Frog is just a creature that's a 1/1 that you can sacrifice to do a fog effect, which doesn't sound that good until you're talking about Marin or Muldrotha or something, where it's just going to never go away. Unless you exile that graveyard after they sacrifice it, it's just going to constantly come back and be a fog effect. And white has something very similar in Cameo of False Hope, basically a clone of Spore Frog in white that they can bring back with a couple different decks. So the white version of Marin, you have things like Tashar, Ancestor's Apostle, that can also just basically reuse that Cameo of False Hope as well. So yeah, it's not just a fog effect on a body, it's essentially a fog effect that in a certain deck can get reused just infinitely, basically.
Yep, and all of the listeners, if you've never ran into that, thank your lucky stars, because I've played against it numerous times, and you just sit there and go, I just can't do anything right now. I just sit here and watch you just turtle around, and then next thing I know, I'm going to lose. Yeah,
unless you're playing a combo deck or something that doesn't care about the combat step, once you see a Spore Frog come down in a Marin deck, you need to have a plan to deal with that, or that you're going to lose. So
that's when you try to turn the table against that player. You're like, come on, guys, we got to deal with this.
Right, yeah. You need to make sure the table is aware of that situation, how that's going to work, for sure. Max, what are some more favorites you have here for frogs?
Well, since Chris brought up one of mine on my list with Tangle, I'm calling an audible.
Okay. Audible.
And I'm going to talk about Illusionist Gambit. This one is, again, a pseudo fog. It's 2 and 2 blue for an instant. And you can cast Illusionist Gambit only during the Declare Blockers step on an opponent's turn. You remove all attacking creatures from combat and untap them. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. Each of those creatures attacks that combat if able, and they can't attack you or a planeswalker you control during that combat. So, this is pretty political. Whether it's people swinging at you or not swinging at you, you can really turn the game around by saving, someone that might be able to help you and eliminating another player, or just, keeping people in the game. It's just a cool card that I wish I could run more often, and it's a pseudo fog that you really don't see too often.
Yeah, you are in effect, rather than saying, I'm not going to take damage from your creatures, you're spending a few more mana to say, I'm not taking damage from your creatures, but somebody else is.
Right.
And that feels really good in a lot of situations. Feels way better than a fog in a lot of situations. It's turning buying yourself a turn into buying yourself a turn and maybe killing somebody else. So yeah, this is a card I don't see that often. I think I've only ever seen it cast once or twice, and it always is devastating. I'm genuinely shocked it doesn't get played more. Very similar to that, there's an older card, Reigns of Power. It does a kind of a similar thing. You untap creatures you control and creatures an opponent controls, and you each gain control of those creatures until end of turn. I've seen Reigns of Power a few times as well, and it tends to be in decks that aren't creature heavy. So if someone's playing a deck without really any creatures, they can just swap their non-existent creature base for the, horde of giant beaters that you have that are coming in, and it winds up just, worst case scenario basically being a fog. But there's plenty of times that you can do some real creative blocking then, and again, have them walk away from the exchange way down and no longer a threat next turn. So also a really cool card and does a lot of work. Rather than just preventing the combat damage, it can be very devastating to their board state as well. It's a good pick, Max. Chris, throw it back to you. Do you have any more here?
I have 3 of them, but I'm kind of saving them till later.
Okay.
I was gonna branch off from fogs into something similar to fogs. So I'm gonna. I got another one that I'm gonna choose here in Dolmen Gate, an artifact for 2 mana. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. And this is something I've actually thought about quite a bit because I've been trying to make, like red work, like mono red. And why not play a card like this and you just keep attacking with these little red creatures? You just keep attacking because it's like you can't, you can block. It doesn't deal any damage, but I can still get through with like 1 or 2 guys, and just send them all every single turn and just pray to God no one turns on you one turn. But
sure. Well, and so instead of basically saving yourself from damage, it's letting you be reckless with when you attack because you don't your creatures just aren't going to die.
Yep. It's actually like a protection type of thing. And then you get to attack, instead of, I got to save these guys to block. It's like, no, we just keep attacking and we go, my life total is my blocker. That's what it is. And hope that it, pans out in the long run. Okay.
Talking about, reusing effects, we've mentioned the option to like affect multiple turns. Constant Miss is maybe a little boring. And it definitely can create some really unfun board lock states. It's 1 in a green. Creatures deal no combat damage this turn. So that looks like a worse fog, except for it has buyback, sacrifice a land. So again, the worst case scenario, if you're playing in just a plain old green deck, even if you don't have a crazy amount of ramp or anything, you can still use it for multiple turns and buy yourself multiple turns versus just one with a fog. But where this tends to oftentimes show up is in landfall decks or lands matter decks, where the green player's putting out a whole ton of lands, or they have a excavator, or they have a Crucible Worlds, so they're never going to run out of lands. You can't just wait, because it's going to be a lock if you wait. You need to counterspell this. Otherwise, it's over. And in plenty of decks, that's just how that works. So it's really, really good. I have it in my Mina and Den deck currently, and I actually probably should take it out. It isn't a lot of fun to play. It's one of those cards where like there's definitely that point in the game where I draw it and I'm like, well, no one's ever, like, unless they all get really, really lucky, I can just grind this game down now. But it's a fantastic card, so I definitely wanted to mention Constant Miss because it is really, really good. Any more interesting ones from you here, Max?
I have one, and I think we can all kind of speak on this because we've all played against it, and that is Angus Mckenzie himself.
Oof. Yeah.
That was actually a really good deck. I don't care what you guys say. It was a good
I agree.
deck.
So Angus Mckenzie is a legendary creature, human cleric for Bant, green, white, blue. It's a 2/2, and it's from all the way back in Legends.
Yeah.
And he has an activated ability of Bant and tap to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn, but you can activate it only before the combat damage step. So, I mean, you have to do it during combat, obviously, or before. But friend of the show, Luke Witten, had a Angus Mckenzie Super Friends deck, and it played a lot of fogs, and when there's a fog on your commander, it just makes things a lot easier.
And I guess it's self-evident if you think about it, but it was the kind of thing that didn't really become apparent to me until I played against the deck. You can't let the game come down to you and the Angus player.
No.
Because prior to that point in the game, they probably don't have, 9 mana sitting around free every turn to fog. Well, number one, and Angus taps too. So like they can't fog lock the game. Once it's down to you and one person, if they have Angus out with any protection on him, then they can fog every turn. So unless you have a way to win outside of the combat damage step, if you let things get down to you and the Angus player is going to win. It's really, really effective. And yeah, that's a really good one on a body. There's a couple other creatures that do similar things, but none of them I don't think are nearly as good as Angus. So that's a good call, Max. Arachnogenesis.
Surprise spiders!
Surprise spiders!
Arachnogenesis is such a good card, and I've seen it cast probably half a dozen times in the last couple months. It's gotten expensive.
Wasn't it just cast in that game with Crush you played on Wednesday? Matt made 7 spiders?
Yeah, just got cast in that game that I was talking about in games we played. It's 2 and a green for an instant. You put X 1/2 green spider creature creature tokens with reach onto the battlefield, where X is the number of creatures attacking you, and you prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn by non-spider creatures. So basically, for 2 more mana than you'd pay for a fog, you make a bunch of spiders that can block pretty much anything because they have reach. They still deal damage to people's stuff, but people's stuff, for the most part, doesn't deal damage to you. Now, it just so happened in the game we were playing where he used it, the attacking deck was filled with changelings, which count as all creature types, so there was still a bit of damage that did get through, but it was still really effective. So like in the worst case scenario, kind of, it still worked pretty well. Very, very often, though, not only do you stop the damage from coming through, and not only do you then possibly kill quite a bit of their stuff, you now have, half a dozen spiders that you can swing back through, and in a green deck, yeah, they're 1/2s, but, there's Overrun and Overwhelming Stampede and Crater Hoof and Pathbreaker Ibex, and there's a bunch of ways to make those 1/2s get way, way scarier, even if there isn't a doubling season or a Parallel Lives or something out. So it's just a really good card, and it's also $17 now.
Holy cow.
Wow.
So we aren't the only ones who think it's a really good card. That's a $17 fog, which I guess is less than Angus. But
because Angus on the reserve list, bud.
yeah. But still, it's a really, really cool card, and it's also a card that's just always funny to see someone play.
Well, you get to say surprise spiders.
Exactly.
Right there is enough.
I think Matt always uses pocket spiders, like the pocket sand from King of the Hill.
Oh, geez.
Pocket dogs.
So there's a couple more here I have, but I'll throw back. I know Chris had a couple more he wanted to mention here too for ones you like,
yep.
Chris.
These two I'm going to lump together because they are pretty much identical. We have one in a card that's called Angel of Grace, and then we have one in a card that's called Angel's Grace. Angel's Grace is an instant split second. Both of them read when this card is played, you can't lose the game this turn. Your opponents can't win the game until end of turn. If damage would reduce your life total to less than 1, it reduces it to 1 instead. So pretty much what this does is it's a last ditch effort going, oh no, stop, and then hope that you can get, back the next turn. The upside to Angel of Grace, it is a 5/4 for 5 mana in white. For 6 mana, you can exile Angel of Grace from your graveyard, and then your life total becomes 10. So you can actually gain the life back.
Yeah, and, kind of like Angel of the Dire Hour, which Matt talked about before, it leaves you that big flying body behind as well.
Yep.
That might, in plenty of situations, be enough to, even though you're sitting at 1 life, might be enough to crack back and take out that person before it becomes relevant that you're at 1 life the following turn.
And the upside to, like, Angel of Grace is, it doesn't stop combat damage, it just stops your life total from getting completely reduced. So you could still block with her, too. You'd be like, oh, this 4/4 is coming at me. I'm going to block and trade, or a 5/5, get rid of that, and then on my next turn I can exile her, go back up to 10, and then whatever else I have on the board could help me swing back.
And like a lot of these where we talked about the extra utility, there's a lot of extra utility in these as well, in that you're not just worrying about stopping combat damage. These will stop that Aetherflux Reservoir from killing you as well, or stop, someone's got a big fireball effect, or someone's using a pestilence, or someone's using whatever, like basically anything that would kill you. If you have the mana free, this will buy you time to maybe find another answer.
Yes.
So yeah, good call. The last one I had here I wanted to mention was Dawn's Charm. Dawn Charm.
Yeah, I had that one on my list too, but I saw, you're on your list. I'm like, I'll leave this one alone.
So it's 1 more mana than a fog, but it's in white. So it's 1 in a white, and it's a modular spell like the charms are. So you have prevent all combat damage will be dealt this turn. So for 1 more than fog in white, it's a fog. But the 2 modular units on it are actually relatively useful as well. Number 1, regenerate target creature. Regenerate isn't necessarily that amazing, but there's plenty of times when someone goes to, Hero's Downfall, your Elvish Norn or something, it's worth spending 2 mana to save it. And the other mode is counter target spell that targets you, which is really useful in plenty of decks too, whether it's, someone trying to hit you with that giant fireball, or someone's trying to, mill you out when they have infinite mana and they want to target that Brain Geyser your direction, or, they want to force you to discard, or, whatever. There are plenty of effects that target you as a player, and Dawn Charm lets you dodge that. So it's a fog with upside. It's a fog if you need it to be a fog, and if you don't, there's 2 other modes on it that both are relatively useful in most game situations. any final ones anybody has here?
Oh, yeah. I got more. Are you kidding me? You should see my
All right.
list. It's like massive.
Lay them on us, bud.
These three I'm going to lump together in one, and now they're not basically a fog per se, but they have a effect that's kind of similar to what it does, and we're going to lump them all together in Ghostly Prison, Propaganda, and Sphere of Safety. These three enchantments, permanent sit on the battlefield, and what they do is they actually tax your opponents to attack, so it reduces what actually happens in the combat step coming at you. And sometimes it could just, like in Sphere of Safety's instance, it could cost 20 mana for them to even attack you, so that's pretty much just a fog in itself that's always going to sit there.
Yeah, they make the act of actually trying to swing at you in the first place impossible.
Yes.
The downside of these, a little bit more than the fog, is they're sitting there, so everyone can see what's going on. They can build removal, they can whatever. Whereas the fog effects tend to be things that come out of nowhere, so it's difficult for people to play around them in most situations.
Yes.
But there's plenty of decks that can interact with enchantments, or you just don't have the cards in hand. Even if you are in the right colors, you're just stuck not being able to pay the mana to take the person out.
Yeah, and honestly, the way I look at them, they're more of a stall tactic card, because at late point in the game, they're kind of worthless because people have the mana, they already have the board state set up. But having an ability like this where it's, not necessarily a fog every turn, but something that reduces the amount you take is still, indispensable.
Yep. One that Max and I have oftentimes talked about as being a fog, and I was kind of surprised he didn't throw it out there yet, is Teferi's Protection.
I just thought it'd be on your list, so I was going to let you discuss it.
Well, and part of the reason it is like, of all the things Teferi's Protection can do, being a fog is probably the least useful, which isn't to say it's not useful, it's just so great that, like, if all you do is to not take damage from that person's swing in because you phase out, that's still amazing.
Yep.
But it does everything else. It survives so much stuff. It's a way for you to dodge, a board wipe, or, dodge someone trying to mill you out, or like, there's a ton of uses for it. But even if most of the time you spend the 3 mana to dodge a lethal attack coming in, it's still almost always worth paying that mana to do that.
I've actually seen it cast a lot as a fog, though, now that I think about it.
I was going to say, that's how I tend to cast it, unless it's in, like, a board wipe diversion.
Well, because you're in that situation where you're like, okay, I've got a really good board state out right now. What am I afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of someone else's board wipe, but I'm also afraid of somebody who's got lethal with an overrun, and they're going to target me because of my board state. So, like, those things tend to all be things you're worried about simultaneously, and you're holding one card in hand that saves you from all of them. It saves you from that board wipe that's going to wipe out your board state, or it saves you from that person who's like, well, player removal is the best removal, so I'm going to take him out. Those things are all things that you tend to be afraid of at once, and Teferi's Protection saves you from most of them. So, yeah, really, really good card.
Teferi's Protection, I think, is the best card in white by far. I don't think there's anything better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I would tend to agree.
I would put it on par with Cyclonic Rift in blue, and
Well, so you mentioned Rift, and I'm not going to call Rift a fog effect.
But I've seen it used as a fog every single time, too.
Well, yeah, and once you start looking at that, like, things like, we're obviously going way far afield of that, but, like, things like Aether Spouts and Aetherize that can only be used in the combat step to mass balance creatures are both really good spells, and once you start kind of thinking of them as fogs, which I tend to, I run Aetherize and Aether Spouts in decks, and that's how I think of them. Like, I'm not trying to use them to nickel and dime somebody, I'm using them to blow out that big swing with a Crater Hoof, but then at that point, you're kind of looking at Rift as well. Like, I think we've all cast a Rift at some point in the middle of someone else's combat step.
Oh, yeah. Except for, when Dromoka's on the field, and then you just go, this Rift is worthless.
It's like, oh, I'm going to Rift. And Mac's like, no, you're not.
Not my problem. It's a you problem.
I think that is when Max is happiest in a game of Magic, is when someone forgets they can't cast spells with Dromoka out.
It is in my top 3. Yes, I will agree with that. It brings me such joy to say, like, no, you aren't. No, you aren't. And then I'm going to kill you now because you wanted to do something. By saying you were going to cast something, I'm now attacking you. I've done that so many times.
I will kill you for your insolence.
Yep.
Someone's got a big plan. Like, that happens to me. You've got big plans. It's all worked out. And you're like, oh, wait, I can't. Oh, no. I knew that, too, and I forgot.
I think next year, that's what I'm going to track. How many times people try to cast spells on my turn when I play Dromoka.
With Dromoka out? Yeah.
And then I'm going to specifically note every time Dana tries to brainstorm at my end step.
Oh, feels bad. And then you say, oh, I guess I can't do it. Okay. Well, I guess I'll take my turn. And then immediately go, okay, I'll save this brainstorm until the beginning of until the end step. I know I've done that at least before, at least once, where I've been unable to cast it and then immediately forgot about it with the same plan to do it again. Yeah. we won't talk about that anymore.
No? Okay.
Any final ones worth talking about here before we wrap up? And there's a gazillion of them. We're talking about ones that we like, so we're not going to go into every iteration here. But any other ones worth mentioning that you guys are fans of?
I guess one that's not really like, so fog is based off of combat damage. We already determined that. But there are other cards, such as a big one that was actually just came out that a lot of people should know about is the Wanderer. Prevents non-combat damage. So I mean, that's like another fog-ish card. Now, in Commander, you don't see a whole lot of non-combat damage cards, but sometimes you do. And
Chandra's Ignition.
Yeah. I mean, and a card like that just stops that from hitting you.
You bet. Stops you from losing the game pretty often, because very, very often when a Chandra's Ignition gets cast, it's because it's going to kill somebody.
Oh, easily.
So,
I mean, there's not
able to get through that for sure.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of them that prevent non-combat damage, but I mean, that's another thing to, to consider, if you're thinking, well, maybe I should add some fogs to my deck, and then think about your meta and who you're playing with, how they play, and be like, okay, so they play a lot of, like lightning bolts and other stuff, so I could put in these cards that prevent that type of damage, and then don't have to worry about the actual fog effect itself.
Yeah, there's not a ton of them out there, and the Wanderer is the newest one, or one of the newest ones, but we got Blessed Sanctuary that was in Ikoria, I believe, right? That's prevent all non-combat damage that will be dealt to you and creatures you control. Whenever a non-token creature comes into play, you create a 2/2 white unicorn creature.
Jumpstart?
That was a Jumpstart, I think. Okay,
yeah,
might be right. Yeah, might be right.
Honestly, all these sets have blended together for me recently. I can't remember which is which anymore.
The fact that it said unicorn, I knew it was Jumpstart.
There we go. Yeah, I think you're right. But there's a few older ones. There's like Mark of Asylum, which is a 2-mana enchantment, prevent non-combat damage dealt to creatures you control. So not you necessarily, but creatures. A Personal Sanctuary prevents non-combat damage that will be dealt to you. So I'm actually just looking at my Pestilence deck where I have a bunch of these. And I'm like, oh, there's a few other ones. Lash Ninth Barrier is one. Sphere of Grace, Sphere of Safety.
The other one that we could discuss is the Circle of Protections. They're all basically foggish, but you can prevent it based on color type of deal. I mean, they are not good by any means. Please don't ever think that I say that they're good, but...
Yeah, I don't think they quite make the cut, but there's a few different ones where you can, like, one of the ones I run Protective Sphere in that deck, you pay 1 life and prevent damage that will be dealt to you by a source of your choice that shares a color with the mana you spend. So, like, if you're in a 5-color deck, you can just pick the appropriate color mana for it. There's a couple older ones that let you, they're like a circle of protection, but they let you pick the color when they come into play, and then you can only, I think Prismatic Barrier is one, and then you can only prevent that color, but like you can tweak that based on what the pod looks like as well. So I know in the past we've talked about a couple of these too. We've talked about Glacial Crevices and Sunstone. They'll let you sacrifice a snowland to fog. And similarly to Constant Mists, if you can replay those lands, well, then you're in pretty good shape to infinitely fog people as well with those effects.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple other ones that prevent, like Glacial Chasm itself, prevents damage.
Right, yeah.
Maze of Ith, it may only target one thing, but I mean, built onto land that you get to play for pretty much free, you just play it and stop one thing at least from coming in.
Court Haven's really effective too. Similar effect. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, anyone who's listening to this, you're thinking like, well, why would I ever play a fog? You can look at your deck, you're like, well, I'm playing a Glacial Chasm and I'm playing, a Maze of Ith.
Yeah.
Technically those are fog effects.
You bet. Yeah, and why would I ever play a fog? Well, I mean, maybe you wouldn't play fog, but maybe you would play Teferi's Protection and use it like a fog, and maybe you would then play that Sudden Spoiling that you can use offensively, or the Spike Weaver that you can use offensively if you're playing in a counter stack, or the Spore Frog that you can recur infinitely as a fog that's just always going to be there. I think the upside and the utility is very much what matters here.
Yeah, definitely when you're building your deck, because we talk about like Heroic Intervention and stuff like that for protecting stuff. All these fogs, a lot of them that we discussed also do that same exact thing. Yeah. So it's something to consider, I don't want to overdo it, but hey, I could do something sneaky with this and catch people off guard.
You bet. All right. Well, I think that is going to wrap up this show for us. We've got a fairly busy week this week. This show is coming out on Monday. We have a deck tech that will come out on Thursday and our preview card on Friday. So hope you tune in for those additional shows this week. If you'd like to find me on social media, you can find me on the Twitterbirds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Max, and you can find Chris at Wise Squishy One. Our podcast is edited by Rafael Garcia, and you can find him at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin McLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We will be back later this week. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.